It had been 3 months since the last time I saw my son's family. This morning, when I got his call inviting me to dinner, I almost cried with joy. I spent the whole afternoon baking an apple pie and buying my grandson a new toy car. My heart overflowed with happiness as I walked up to the door of the house I had helped them buy. But what greeted me was my daughter-in-law's fake smile and an ice-cold line. "Mom, we've got unexpected guests tonight. There's no room for you." My son stood behind her, head down, saying nothing. From inside, my grandson's voice floated out. "Who's here, Mom?" "It's not important, honey," my daughter-in-law answered flatly. I froze. The rain fell harder by the minute. I was shivering in my soaked clothes while they sat down to a warm dinner inside. I stood there for 3 hours, in the cold wind and humiliation, until the warmth in my chest came from clarity. I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and quietly locked every account they were living off. Soon, she would learn that tonight's rain was only the beginning of the real storm headed her way. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Marjorie Bennett, 70 years old, a widow for almost 8 years. I live alone in a small house in Portland, Oregon, the home my husband Walter and I spent more than 30 years building. After he died of heart disease, I had no one left but Ethan, my only son, and his wife, Clara. I used to think that as long as I helped them, I still had a family. Ethan is a civil engineer, gentle and quiet. Clara, my daughter-in-law, is a beautiful, sharp woman, but cold as glass. From the day they married, she made me feel like an uninvited guest in my own son's life. Even so, I did what any mother would do. I gave everything. I pulled from my savings to cover their mortgage, helped them buy a new car, and paid private school tuition for Leo. Each month, most of my pension went straight into Ethan's account to ease the burden for the young couple. And I told myself, that's a mother's joy. So when Ethan called that day, inviting me to dinner after 3 busy months, my heart blossomed. I hadn't heard my grandson's voice for too long. Leo is 9, curly-haired, and loves my stories about when his grandpa was alive. I wanted to see him, to hold him, to hear about school. I spent the whole afternoon getting ready. I chose the navy dress, Walter once said, lights up the whole room when you wear it. I took from the wooden box the pearl necklace he gave me for our 30th anniversary. I spritzed a little lavender perfume, the scent Leo once said, "Smells like your baked treats, Grandma." Before leaving, I put the still warm apple pie and Leo's new toy car into a basket. I looked at the clock, 5:30. Enough time to take the bus across town. On the way, I couldn't stop smiling, picturing my grandson squealing when he saw the gift. When I reached their neighborhood, crimson maple leaves littered the path. A quiet pride rose in me. I had paid most of the down payment for this house. Ethan once said, "Mom, I don't know how to thank you enough." I just smiled. Your happiness is thanks enough. I rang the bell right at 6. The rain started tapping, light as a greeting. I heard footsteps, then the door opened. Clara appeared in a fitted black dress, the very one I'd given her last month. "Oh, you're here already?" she said, voice flat as water. "Of course." Ethan said dinner at 6. I brought apple pie for Leo. I smiled, hands trembling slightly from the rain. Clara glanced past me, then lowered her voice. "Actually, we have unexpected guests tonight. We're short on food, so I can help. I brought extra pie," I answered, trying to keep my voice cheerful. She gave a tight smile, turned inside, and said something. A minute later, Ethan came out. The look in my son's eyes made my heart pinch. He wouldn't meet my gaze. "Mom, I'm sorry. We have guests tonight. There's no room for you." "No room for Mom." The words dropped into me like a stone. I stood there, stunned. "But you invited me, Ethan. You said, 'I know, but it's just unexpected. I'll come by tomorrow, okay?'" I felt my lips move, but no sound came out. The rain thickened. Wind swept under the porch. I hugged the basket tighter, trying to steady my hands. From inside, Leo's bright voice rang out. "Who's here, Mom?" "It's not important, honey," Clara answered, dry as dust. Not important. His grandmother not important. I stood still for a few seconds, then whispered, "I understand. I'll go." But I didn't leave right away. I stepped back under the small awning. Warm light spilled from the house. The smell of food drifted out, roast meat, wine, laughter. Inside was my family. Outside, in the cold rain, was me, a stranger. At first I thought I'd walk away, but my legs wouldn't move. I looked through the window, saw Clara pouring wine, Ethan chatting with guests, Leo sitting quietly, having no idea his grandmother was standing out there in the rain. Time crawled with cruelty. 5 minutes. 10. 30. The rain grew heavy. Water running through my hair. Icy at the nape of my neck. I tried to shield the gifts, but the wrapping paper was soaked. The toy car peeked through the clear plastic. The apple pie cooled in its box. An hour passed. Music drifted out. They played "Fly Me to the Moon," Walter's favorite. I pressed my lips together, fighting tears. After 2 hours, I began to shake with cold. 3 hours later, my legs were numb, my heart leaden. When the window cracked open, I saw Clara say something to a friend, eyes darting toward me. She smiled, not from awkwardness, but from pleasure. I saw her lips form the words, then caught a few. Let her learn not to show up uninvited. I tightened my grip on the basket handle. Something inside me shattered, then hardened to steel. I didn't scream, didn't wail, didn't cry. I took a deep breath and let the rain wash away the last of my tears. I kept standing there, hoping for a small miracle that Ethan would open the door, realize his mistake, and say, "Mom, come in." But the door stayed still. Only music from the living room, the clink of cutlery on china, and faraway laughter. I stepped up to the porch again and knocked. This time, Ethan appeared, looking flustered and tired. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said softly, eyes on the wood floor. "Tonight's really inconvenient." Before I could answer, Clara cut in from behind him. "Older folks should know when to go home." "It's raining, you'd better leave before you catch a cold." I looked straight at her. "I'm here because my son invited me, not because I'm nosy." Clara gave a thin smile. "What invitation?" Ethan only said, "Maybe. You misheard." Ethan stayed silent, didn't object, didn't defend me. He only lowered his head. In that moment, I understood silence can be crueler than words. Through the crack, I caught a glimpse of Leo on the stairs, his small face lighting up. "Grandma," he whispered, then flinched as Clara turned. "Upstairs," she snapped. "Grandma's busy, she can't talk." "But, up." He vanished around the corner. A door thudded shut, heavy as my heart hitting the floor. The rain thickened. Water seeped down my collar, freezing. The gift basket weighed on my arm. The apple pie I'd baked all afternoon was soggy, butter scent mingling with rain. The gift wrap around Leo's toy melted, sticking to my fingers. I tried to hold it together, but the red paper tore, revealing the little blue car inside, the only thing still intact. I turned to leave, then stopped when Clara's voice carried from the dining room, clear through the door. "I'm done, Ethan. She uses money like a leash. Don't you see? She always wants a hand in our business." Ethan's tired voice. "She's just helping." "Helping? Helping to control us, more like it. I'm sick of always having to thank Mom for everything. This house, this car, even Leo's tuition, all from her money. Aren't you ashamed?" Each word was a blade. I stood frozen. The baby boy I once held through feverish nights now sitting silent while his wife insulted me in the house I helped them buy. I gripped the wooden railing. A sharp ache shot through my finger joints. The rain wasn't what made me shake anymore, it was the humiliation. "Ethan, I'm serious," Clara went on. "If she had no money, do you think she'd still show up? She just needs to feel powerful." A small laugh rose from someone at the table. I didn't know who. I only knew that, in that instant, something in me broke for good. I raised my head and looked through the window, saw them eating under warm light, looking so happy. They didn't know that out there, the trembling old woman in the rain was quietly laying down the role of the generous mother they'd exploited for years. I breathed in, cold, soaking to the bone. I opened my purse and took out my phone. My hand shook, but my voice when the call connected was steady. "Hello," I said. "This is Marjorie Bennett. I need to lock all joint accounts under my name, including authorized user cards, savings, and online access. Please process it tonight." The line hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." "May I confirm?" I answered, crisp. "No reason needed. Just do it now." 7 minutes later, when I ended the call, I knew the rain had washed away not only the grime on the street, but also the last bit of naivete in me. I stood in the open, exhaled, and looked up at the lit house. They still laughed, still chatted, still lived under the illusion that I'd always be that weak woman. They didn't know in just a few hours, everything in their lives would turn, and this time, the one steering the storm would be me. I lingered under their porch a while longer, listening to the rain blend with the living room laughter, a sound so strange it hurt. Then I left, my soaked shoes slapping on the paving stones. The road home was dark, only streetlights shimmering on puddles. I walked slowly, letting anger and humiliation dissolve with each step. Back home, I hung up my coat, wiped my face, and sat in the armchair by the window, Walter's spot for morning papers. The little room felt warm, but inside I was still cold. Outside, the rain didn't let up. It fell steady, stubborn, as if cleansing something too. I looked at the phone in my hand, the screen still showing the recent call to the bank. I knew I'd just done something irreversible, and strangely, I wasn't afraid. I called back, this time to confirm everything. The rep, a young woman with a gentle voice, reviewed the details. "Mrs. Marjorie Bennett, I confirm we've temporarily locked all accounts connected to your name, including savings, retirement, and any joint accounts with Mr. Ethan Bennett." I answered softly. "That's right. And I want to ensure all access, authorized cards, and transaction authorizations are frozen. No exceptions." A pause. "Ma'am, this will temporarily suspend all usage for the co-holder. Are you certain? They won't be able to withdraw, pay, or transfer anything." I looked out the window, through the blurred curtain of rain. For a moment, I could almost see their house far off in memory. Warm lights, wine glasses, laughter. And Clara's tilted head, that smug smile as she raised her glass, like toasting a victory she thought was locked in. "I'm more certain than I've ever been," I said, oddly calm. "Please mark it for tonight." "Yes, ma'am," the young woman replied. "I'll note it as urgent." "One moment, please." I heard keys clacking, a system processing, then a short stillness. "All set, Mrs. Bennett," she said. "Every account is now safely locked. Would you like us to email a confirmation?" "No need. I'll know when they call me in the morning," I murmured. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" I paused, then said, "If you have a mom, hug her one more time tonight. Don't wait until it's only rain falling to realize you've been silent too long." A quiet beat on the other end. "I will, ma'am." When the call ended, I set the phone down and let out a slow breath. A lightness flooded me, like I'd just slipped a shackle I'd worn for years without noticing. I stood, went to the kitchen, turned on the soft yellow light, and boiled water for ginger tea. The steam rose warm and spicy, soothing my chest. I cracked the window to let in night air, damp earth, and the patter on the tin roof. I sat, cupped the mug, and drifted into memory. I remembered my years as a nurse, endless night shifts, swollen feet from 8 hours on them, hands rough from rubber gloves and antiseptic. I remembered pinching pennies to buy Ethan his first school shoes, paying for his graduation suit, and quietly borrowing so he could study engineering. I never hesitated, never asked for anything back, because I believed that's what mothers do, and for 40 years I never doubted that. Until tonight. Thunder rumbled far off, low and heavy, like a weary heartbeat. I stared through the rain, remembering Ethan's averted eyes. Not the eyes of someone who hates you, the eyes of a son trapped between loyalty and cowardice. I wasn't angry with him, but the disappointment smoldered slow and deep like coals under ash. I set the cup down and switched on the small lamp in the living room. My little house, plain as it was, felt cozier than ever. No fake laughter, no snide remarks, just the warmth of my own company, and suddenly, that felt precious. On the shelf, our wedding photo still sat. Walter in a gray suit, me in a simple white dress, both of us smiling kindly. I stroked the frame and whispered, "Walter, I finally learned the lesson you tried to teach me. I can't save someone by losing myself." A tear slid down, and I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall, the way the rain was erasing the day outside. I stepped onto the porch with my warm tea. The rain had softened, steady as a lullaby. I inhaled, letting the ginger heat my chest again. In the quiet, I told myself, tomorrow they'll taste the real storm. Not because I want revenge. I just want them to understand kindness isn't a test. And a mother's silence doesn't mean weakness. I went back in, folded the bank notebook closed, and tucked it in the drawer. Lamplight reflected my face in the window, still me, but different. There was something in my eyes, a calm firmness I'd never seen there before. I turned off the light and headed to bed. The rain outside kept time like a heart. Tonight, I would sleep well. Because in the morning, when they found the accounts frozen, they'd know what it feels like to be left in the rain, and maybe then they would finally understand me. The next morning, Portland was strangely still. After a long night of rain, the air was crisp, faint with pine and damp earth. I made my coffee as usual, one strong scoop, a splash of almond milk, then sat by the window. Pale sunlight filtered through the blinds, tinting the little kitchen a soft yellow. I took a sip, the bitter spreading across my tongue. Inside, there was no anger, no sadness, just a quiet space I couldn't name, like a lake after a storm. I flipped on the small radio, a jazz tune Walter used to love. On the table, last night's ginger tea still carried a gentle scent. Then the phone rang. The tone trilled fast, insistent. I glanced at the screen, Ethan. I smiled, set down the cup, and took a steady breath before picking up. "Good morning, son," I said evenly. Ethan's voice came fast, panicked. "Mom, what happened?" "Clara's card got declined. Then the bank called saying, the accounts are frozen. My card doesn't work either. Did you do something?" I stirred my coffee, the spoon's clink ringing against porcelain. "Oh, probably a system issue," I answered slowly. "Try living without it for a bit." A half-second of silence, then Clara's voice cut in high and furious. "If you don't unlock them, I'll sue. This is theft." I raised an eyebrow and smiled. "You can try. But do check who's the primary name on the deed, the bank records, and the mortgage." Silence on the other end. I could almost hear Clara swallow. Then she shouted, voice shaking, "You'll regret this!" "Maybe," I said. "But at least this time, I won't regret staying silent." I hung up. The phone rang again right after this time, the bank confirming every account had been fully frozen per my request. I thanked them calmly and ended the call like I'd just checked off a normal task. A few minutes later, the doorbell chimed. I guessed it was no one but Helen, my neighbor of 20 years, a widow who had witnessed so many chapters of my family's story. Helen stepped in with a basket of warm bread and a gentle smile. "I heard arguing from Ethan's house at dawn. Everything okay, Marge? I poured her a cup of coffee and gave her the short version. When I got to the part where Clara threatened to sue, Helen burst into bright laughter. Well, you finally did what you should have done ages ago. I didn't think you had it in you. I smiled and shrugged. I didn't either, but maybe after standing in the rain for 3 hours, anyone would find the nerve to do something different. Helen squeezed my hand, voice low. You know, people only discover their strength when there's no one left to lean on. We sat quietly for a while, listening to cars on the street and sparrows on the roof. In my small kitchen, the light washed over 2 women who'd lived through too many seasons, and in Helen's eyes, I saw a reflection of myself, calm, tired, but still proud. After Helen left, I walked around the house. Everything felt so familiar that it calmed me. Walter's bookshelf, the stack of old medical files, the embroidered curtains I'd sewn by hand. I opened the desk drawer and took out an old notebook with the will I'd written 2 years ago. I spread the paper on the table. Each line was neat and careful, the ink slightly faded where I'd signed. All assets, real estate, and savings will be transferred to my son, Ethan Bennett, and my daughter-in-law, Clara Bennett. I read it again, my lips trembling. I remembered believing, when I wrote this will, that it was how I could hold the family together. I was afraid that if I didn't give, they would drift away. Now I understand it was that unconditional giving that pushed them away from me. I picked up a pen and drew a straight line through the words Clara Bennett. Then I paused over my son's name. 1 minute, 2, 3 passed. Then I crossed that out too. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "It's not because I hate you, Ethan. It's because I want you to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I rewrote the ending. All assets will be used to establish a fund to support older adults who are financially and emotionally abused by family members. The fund will be called the Walter and Marjorie Foundation. I signed again and folded the paper carefully. Do you believe that sometimes giving to strangers is the best way to save your loved ones or at least yourself? If you were in my place, would you do the same? I truly want to hear your honest thoughts in the comments. That afternoon, I called my attorney, Mr. Harris, who had handled my real estate paperwork. When I told him I wanted to update my will, he was a little surprised but said, "I'll get the documents ready, Mrs. Bennett." I took a walk to the nearby park where the willows swayed in the breeze. Children ran around, laughter filling the air, and I sat on a wooden bench, watching the sky begin to brighten. A lightness rose in me as if I had finally taken back ownership of my life. Around noon, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Ethan. It was Leo, my grandson. His voice was small and shaky. "Grandma, Mom said you did something that made them mad. Are you sick?" "Dad isn't saying anything, just sitting there." I swallowed hard and kept my voice warm. "No, I'm fine, Leo. I'm just teaching your parents a small lesson. You'll understand someday. Can I come over to play with you?" I smiled. "When the sun's out, I'll come get you." When I hung up, the tears finally came. Not from pain, but from tenderness for a child too young to understand the splits between adults. I wiped my eyes and told myself, "One day, you'll know I did all this so you could grow up in a world that respects those who raised you." The afternoon passed quietly. I watered the plants, reorganized the bookshelves, and wrote a few lines in my journal. Today, for the first time in years, I am bound to no one. I'm no longer a shadow behind someone else's front door. I am Marjorie Bennett, and I am free. Night fell and Portland settled into a thin mist. I brewed an herbal tea, turned on the desk lamp, and looked over the new will again. The light fell across the freshly dried signature, the strokes firm and final. Softly, I spoke to Walter. "See, I finally learned how to stand up. No shouting, no blame, just one word. Enough." I slid the new will into an envelope, sealed it, and locked it in the safe. The click of the metal lock was small, but it echoed inside me like a bell of release. Outside, the breeze stirred the curtains, and pale moonlight slipped through the window pane. I looked out at the wide sky, took a deep breath, and felt my heart beating slowly, steadily, stronger than ever. Tomorrow, I knew they would keep calling, maybe show up at my door, maybe cry, maybe rage. That was fine, because this time, I wouldn't back down. I smiled slightly, turned off the light, and told myself, they left me standing in the rain for 3 hours. Now it's their turn to feel that cold. Then I went to bed, pulled up the blanket, and slept deeply, the first real rest in years, knowing my heart was finally at peace. The next morning, Portland was still damp from the night's rain. I was making coffee when the door pounded hard enough to rattle the frame. I knew right away it was them, Ethan and Clara. I opened the door. My son stood straight with his hands in his pockets, face pale from lack of sleep. Next to him, Clara wore a long coat, makeup hurriedly done, eyes red, whether from real tears or not, I couldn't tell. I stood across the threshold, quietly looking at two people I had once believed were my family. "We just want to talk," Ethan said softly. "Fine," I answered. "Come in." But today, no one gets to dodge the truth. Inside, Helen, my neighbor, was already seated at the dining table. I'd asked her to come early. Not out of fear, but because I wanted a witness. Clara sat, hands shaking, trying to sound gentle. "Mom, it was all a misunderstanding. I didn't mean." I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to say. I looked at her, my eyes cold. "What misunderstanding made you shut the door in my face and leave me in the rain for 3 hours? Or what misunderstanding made you call me fake, a burden, an old dog?" The air froze. Ethan turned to his wife, stunned. "Did you really say that?" I didn't answer. Helen spoke up, slow and steady. "I heard it all, Clara, through the window next door. Every word you said to your friend. That can't be called a misunderstanding." Clara quickly wiped her tears. I'm sorry, I lost control. It was too stressed, I cut in. Sorry doesn't mean anything when the person saying it can't even remember what they did. If you're sincere, repeat it, word for word. Just like you said that night. She froze, looking to Ethan for rescue. He lowered his head, silent. Helen stayed still, hands clasped on the table, eyes fixed on Clara. I'm sorry," Clara stammered. "I heard that," I said. "But I want to hear the exact words you used." Her voice tightened, shrinking to a rasp. I'm sorry for calling you fake." I said nothing. "I'm sorry for saying you were a burden." The room was so thick with tension you could hear the wall clock tick. I still didn't speak. Helen glanced down, her hands tightening, holding back anger. Clara swallowed, eyes blurring. "And I'm sorry for calling you an old dog." The last word broke into a sob. Ethan turned away, gripping the chair. I sat still, looking at the woman in front of me, not with hatred but with emptiness. Those words had once been knives, now they were only echoes. I stood, voice steady. "If you're truly sorry, kneel." Clara stared at me, incredulous. "What?" "You heard me. I don't need a performance. I don't need you to pretend. I want to know if you have enough courage to bow your head to your own wrongdoing. Are you trying to humiliate me?" She snapped, voice cracking. I held her gaze without blinking. "I'm not doing anything. I'm letting you see the same humiliation you threw at someone else." Clara stepped back. Ethan started to speak, but I cut him off. "Don't get involved, Ethan. You weren't the one humiliated that day. You were the one who stayed silent while your mother was." He froze, eyes clouded. Helen turned away with a sigh. In the small room, the rain outside grew louder, in rhythm with my steady heartbeat. I didn't shout or command. I just waited. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd leave. Then Clara's lips trembled, and she whispered, "Fine." She stepped forward slowly, each step heavy, dragging her pride along with it. "You don't have to," Ethan started, but Clara held up a hand. She stood in front of me, eyes glassy with tears, and then sank down. Her knees hit the wooden floor with a dull thud in the quiet room. Her hair was a mess. Mascara streaked black down her cheeks. Tears fell, blending with the sound of rain on the eaves. The wet, weighty sound of a storm brought low. She spoke through ragged sobs. "I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong." Ethan stood frozen, his eyes hollow. Helen glanced at me, lips pressed tight. I said nothing. I just looked, letting this image etch into my memory, not for revenge, but to remind myself that silence can be powerful when used at the right moment. The room held nothing but harsh breathing and rain. On the cold wood floor, Clara knelt, tears mixed with shame, and I knew this confrontation had finally reached its true end. The room still held the chill and scent of the morning rain as Clara knelt on the wood floor, her shoulders trembling, tears streaking through the mascara on her cheeks. I stood still, looking down at her not with the eyes of a victor, but of a mother who had finally had enough. I was quiet for a few seconds, then drew a long breath. "All right, Clara. You can stand up. I don't need you down there any longer. Now we move to part 2, the new rules." Clara lifted her head, eyes exhausted, and Ethan looked up slightly, stunned. "Rules?" he repeated. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and set both hands on the old wooden table. Helen, still there, watched in silence. The dim light from the window fell across my face, and even I knew there was no room left for pity. "That's right," I said slowly, clearly. "From today on, if you two still want to set foot in this house or have any relationship with me at all, you will follow a mother's 10 rules." Clara wiped her cheeks, voice hoarse. "Are you trying to control our whole lives?" I gave a small smile. "No, I'm taking back control of mine." Helen nodded gently in agreement. I opened the small notebook where I'd written everything last night, firm strokes like a vow. I looked straight at them. "Let's begin. First rule, no more reckless spending." I looked at Ethan. "From now on, you won't get those little bits of help every month. I worked my whole life to save, not to watch you spend it on restaurants, cars, or things that only make people look rich." Ethan started to protest, but I raised my hand. "Son, I lived on a nurse's modest paycheck and raised you, and I never owed anyone. If I could do it, so can the two of you. My money is not an open bank for anyone to withdraw from at will." Clara dropped her gaze and bit her lip. Helen quietly smiled and jotted a note on the paper beside her. "Second rule, I support Leo only, not the two of you." My voice softened a touch. "I won't let my grandson go without. Tuition, clothes, anything necessary for Leo, I'll cover it. But all payments will go directly to the school or his legal guardian, not through either of you anymore." Ethan nodded slightly. Clara looked like she wanted to speak, then only sighed. "If you truly care about your son," I said, "you'll understand this is what's best for him." Third rule, Clara has 30 days to get a job. I met her eyes. 30 days. Not to prove anything to me, but to prove you can still live on your own merits. I won't cover credit cards, shopping, or any bill. If on day 30 you still don't have a job, you will leave that house." Clara glared. "Leave my house?" I lifted my chin, calm. "That house is still in my name, Clara. You've been staying there by my grace." The air tightened. Ethan shut his eyes briefly, accepting the truth he'd avoided for years. "I'm giving you time," I said. "But don't forget, my son Mercy doesn't extend forever." Fourth rule, don't show up unless you're invited. My voice dropped. For years, I've been the one calling, sending gifts, visiting, and arranging every family gathering. From now on, if I don't invite, you don't come. Don't knock, don't pretend to drop by, don't bring a cheap gift and a fake smile. Let this house be truly quiet." Clara bowed her head, lips tight. Ethan stayed silent. Helen added a few lines, her mouth set like she was holding back a sigh. Fifth rule, One disrespectful word and all support ends forever. I leaned slightly and looked at both of them. I've had enough of insults, fake tears, and complicit silence. If there is even one more disrespectful line, I will act as if you never existed in my life. No warning, no forgiveness, no return. Helen lifted her head, looked at me. I'll bold that one, she said firmly. Clara shivered. I saw her hand clutch her coat, fear flickering under the last of her pride. Ethan said nothing, looking like a man waking from a long daze. I closed the notebook, set the pen on the table, and looked at Helen. Now I want a clear record, not a contract, a family agreement. Helen understood. She pulled a blank sheet and began writing, "Agreement between Mrs. Marjorie Bennett and her son Ethan Bennett and his wife Clara Bennett. All parties agree to the rules as stated, witnessed by Helen Porter." She read each line, steady and clear. I nodded and signed. Helen signed next, then slid the page to Ethan. He took the pen with a trembling hand. I understand, Mom," he said quietly, and signed. The pen stopped in front of Clara. She looked at me, eyes wet. "Do you really want to humiliate me this much?" I shook my head. "No, Clara. I want you to learn to respect other people's boundaries. The humiliation, that's what you sowed for yourself." She said nothing more and signed. The signature wobbled, crooked like her pride, cracking apart. Helen folded the paper into a file and said, "That's that. From now on, everything is clear." The room went still. On the porch, sunlight began to push through the clouds, reflecting on the wood floor where a faint, damp mark still showed where Clara had knelt. She stood, grabbed her purse, and said nothing. When she turned, her eyes met mine, no hatred left, only fear and shame. Ethan lowered his head, squeezed his wife's hand, and together they walked out. A light breeze crossed the porch, carrying the lingering scent of coffee through the air. Helen exhaled and said softly, "I've never seen you this strong, Marge." I smiled and answered gently, "It's not strength, Helen. I'm just too tired to be weak anymore." She nodded, her gaze softening. "These 10 rules aren't only for them. You know? They're for other mothers too, the ones who need to remember that love still needs boundaries." I looked out the window, where the first sunbeams lit the rain still clinging to the glass. Inside me rose a deep calm, not joy, but release. That day, for the first time in years, I sat in my own home, in quiet and light, and realized a mother's strength isn't about how much she sacrifices, it's about knowing when to stop. And I stopped. This time, for good. In the days that followed, spring came to Portland. Clear skies, soft winds, trees starting to bud. My life slipped back into simple rhythms I'd forgotten. Getting up early, making coffee, reading the paper, walking with Helen around the park, then coming home to cook myself lunch. No more sudden calls begging for an urgent few $100s, no more long texts listing bills due. Just quiet, pure, like the breath of freedom. I didn't know how they were managing on the other side of town, not until Helen brought the paper over and said, "You know, I saw Clara at the supermarket. She looked like she hadn't slept in days." I nodded lightly, saying nothing. I didn't feel happy, but I didn't pity her either. Sometimes life has to let people taste their own consequences. Ethan called me for the first time after nearly a week of silence. His voice was hoarse, tired. "Mom, I'm trying to get things in order. Leo's tuition is coming due, and I still can't pull it together." I sipped my tea and answered calmly, "Don't worry, I've paid the school directly. Leo won't go without." Silence on the line. I heard a soft exhale, then a quiet, "Thank you, Mom," I replied. "No need to thank me. I'm taking care of Leo, not the two of you." After that call, I knew he understood. Some wounds don't need words. Silence is enough to wake people up. 3 days later, on a damp afternoon, I was replanting a few lavender pots on the porch when I heard a car stop at the gate. I looked up, and there was Clara. No makeup, hair tied in a rush, a wrinkled coat. She walked slowly, like she was carrying a mountain of embarrassment on her shoulders. Can I come in?" I looked at her, then opened the gate. "If you're here to talk, yes." We sat in the kitchen. The air still smelled faintly of coffee. She glanced around, maybe realizing for the first time that my small house wasn't luxurious at all, but clean, tidy, and warm, a far cry from their cold, big place. "I don't know where to start," Clara said, her voice rough. "We're in real trouble. Ethan's trying, but his paycheck isn't enough. I'm only asking you for a small amount. Just this once." I set my cup down and looked her straight in the eye. "You don't need money, Clara. You need to learn self-respect." She froze. "You think I don't have self-respect?" "I don't think." "I see." I spoke slowly. "You've lived on other people's money so long you forgot what it feels like to stand on your own 2 feet. You think money fixes everything, when really it just covers a hole inside you." Clara went quiet, her eyes flickering between anger and shame. "You don't understand. I used to have a job. I used to have dignity. But after I married Ethan, I thought I could stay home with our child, take care of the house." I cut in, gentle but firm. "You didn't take care of your child. You took care of your pride." A heavy pause. She bit her lip, then whispered, "I've been looking for work. But all they offer are manual jobs, retail, server. I can't. I don't want the pitying looks. It's beneath me." I gave a small smile, not angry. "Beneath you?" I stood, went to a cabinet and took out an old photo frame. In the picture, it's me in a nurse's uniform, hollow-cheeked, hands cracked, holding a mop. "See this? I scrubbed hospital floors for 20 years. I changed adult diapers, bathed the dying, cleaned wounds most people couldn't stand to look at. I did it so your husband could eat and study. And not once did I feel beneath anyone." Clara lowered her head, her hands clenched together. I saw tears start to fill her eyes, but she held them back. "I'm not ashamed of being poor, Clara," I went on, softer. "I'm ashamed when someone who can work chooses to bow to money instead." She sighed, voice shaking. "You're strong. I can't be like that." I pulled my chair closer and sat beside her. "You think I was born strong? No. I was weak too. I cried when people looked down on me, but I never forgot one thing. People only belittle you when you allow them to." That sentence broke her. This time, the tears weren't for show. She bent her head, shoulders shaking, real sobs breaking loose. I let her be no pat on the shoulder, no soothing words. I let her cry like a child because sometimes only at the bottom of pride can someone finally see who they are. After a few minutes, she looked up, eyes swollen, voice raw. I don't know where to start." I smiled gently. "Anywhere. A coffee shop, a corner store, the bakery down the block. No one says you have to start at the top. What matters is that you actually start." She stayed quiet. Her eyes drifted to the wood floor, the same spot where, weeks ago, she'd knelt in humiliation. Now, a thin ray of afternoon sun slipped through the door and lit a small streak across it. Clara saw it, and so did I. I spoke slowly, low and warm. "Self-respect can't be borrowed, Clara. It only arrives when you stand up and earn your first meal without putting out your hand. The day you do that, you'll understand what I'm saying now." She nodded, said nothing, just whispered, "I'll try." I stood, refilled our water, then looked at her one last time before she left. "You don't need to thank me. Thank yourself for being ashamed at the right time." She pressed her lips together and left. Her steps were slow, but steadier than when she arrived. I stood at the door and watched her disappear under the trees. Helen called over from next door. "Was that her again?" I nodded. Yes, and maybe for the first time, she didn't come here to perform. Helen smiled and waved. I always knew you could make people change without raising your voice. I answered softly, half to her, half to myself. No one changes in a day, Helen. But today, I saw her first real tears, and maybe that's the start of something. I went back inside and made another cup of tea. Outside, evening fell. Light spilled onto the wooden porch, a peaceful scatter of gold. I sat down, light as a cloud. Maybe true forgiveness doesn't come from pity, it comes from daring to look at someone in their weakest moment and believing they can be better than yesterday. And I knew that somewhere, in Clara's shame today, a seed of change had been planted. One May morning, while I was making coffee, a soft knock sounded at the door. Not the hard, tense pounding Clara used. This knock was hesitant, almost afraid of being turned away. I opened it. Ethan stood there, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled shirt. He bowed his head and rasped, "Mom, can I come in?" Looking at my son, my heart gave a quick, sharp beat, not out of pity, but because in that worn-out posture, I knew he was finally seeing what he used to ignore. I nodded. "Come in, Ethan. This door has never been locked to you." He sat at the kitchen table, where the smell of fresh coffee still hung. I poured him a cup. His hands shook so much, a few drops splashed. He lifted it to his lips but didn't drink. I don't know where to start," he said, voice cracking. "Everything's worse than ever." I waited. "Clara," he drew a deep breath, "she can't find a job and she blames me. Yesterday she called me useless in front of Leo, said I live off my mother, that I'm an embarrassment to her friends." He lowered his head and covered his face. "Mom, I can't take it anymore. Every time I try to talk, she starts yelling, brings up the money, the house, all the things I know you gave. I didn't say anything, just set my hand on his shoulder. Now you see, don't you? When money disappears, real love either shows up or it disappears with it." Ethan looked up, eyes red. "You're right. I was blinded. I thought she just needed love, needed to feel safe. Turns out what she needed wasn't a person next to her, it was a life she could show off." He let out a bitter laugh. "I was foolish, Mom. I thought siding with my wife proved I was a grown man, but really I let her control us both." I looked at my son, aching and relieved at once. He was cutting the cord that had bound him for years, late but brave. I poured more coffee and asked, "Ethan, do you want to live in fear or in truth?" He looked confused. "I don't understand." "You do," I said slowly. "You're afraid of losing her, afraid of breaking, afraid Leo won't have his mother. But you forget what you're trading away. You're letting yourself be diminished day after day. Is that living?" He stayed quiet. Sunlight slid through the window onto his face, thinner than before. I spoke softly. "Do you remember, Ethan, when you were little and I worked night shifts for weeks? I'd come home smelling like antiseptic, hair damp with sweat, and you'd run to me and say, 'Mom's a superhero.' You were proud of me for doing what you couldn't imagine. Now tell me, are you proud of yourself?" He bowed his head, said nothing. A tear fell and dotted the back of his hand. "No," he whispered. "I'm not the man you raised me to be. I let Clara control everything. I know she's wrong, but I'm scared to make her mad, scared to lose the perfect family people see. I've never really been a strong husband." I touched his hand lightly and murmured, "Admitting that means you've started to change." He nodded, breathing deep. "I just don't know where to start, Mom." I stood, went to my desk, and took out a small envelope. I set it in front of him. "This is a copy of the agreement from the other day. Not to throw in anyone's face, but to remind you that boundaries are now clear. No one gets to blame the past anymore." Ethan opened it, eyes landing on Clara's shaky signature. He gave a sad smile. She signed it, but she didn't get it. To her, everything's a power game. I sat across from him, voice firm. "No one can take your power unless you hand it over. You handed it over with your silence." Ethan nodded, voice tight. I understand. Just then, the landline rang. I saw the caller ID, Leo's school. I picked up. Mrs. Bennett, we're calling to inform you Leo's tuition for this term is still unpaid. We've tried to reach his parents without success. I glanced at Ethan. He looked flustered, mouthing an apology. I spoke into the phone, steady. Thank you for calling. Please contact Leo's parents directly. I won't step in for them this time. I hung up. Ethan stared, unsure. Mom, I thought you were still helping with Leo? I am, Ethan. But I can't keep paying for choices you won't take responsibility for. If you want Leo to have a future, his parents need to learn how to earn it. He bowed his head, didn't argue. Silence stretched, thick enough to hear the clock tick. I turned away, poured more coffee, and spoke slowly. Ethan, I'm giving you 72 hours. In the next 3 days, you decide. Either she changes, or you leave. There's no third option. If you stay in a marriage you know is rotten, you're teaching Leo to endure mistakes instead of fixing them. He looked up, eyes wide. 72 hours? Yes, I don't need an answer now, but at the end of 3 days, I want you here not to cry, but to tell me what you chose, because this time, I won't rescue you. I walked to the window. Outside, the sun began to break through. Light danced on the leaves, and across Ethan's face, the face I'd shielded for 40 years, now like a child learning to step on his own. He sat there a long time. Then he spoke, voice rough. Do you believe in me, Mom? I turned and met his eyes. Since the day you were born, I've believed in you. The trouble is, I believed too much while you didn't believe in yourself. Ethan gave a sad smile, tears sliding down. I think I'm starting to understand you. I nodded. Good. I don't need a dutiful son anymore. I need a man who protects his own dignity. We sat in silence a few more minutes. I heard the clock shift. The wind tapped the window. When Ethan stood, he seemed different, not strong yet, but with a resolve in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. I'll talk to Clara, he said, steady. Not to. Fight to face the truth. I can't let Leo grow up in a house full of fear. I looked at my son, worried and proud. Remember, Ethan, real change begins in silence. But after that, it has to be action. He nodded and stepped out. As his figure faded into the morning sun, I stood there, hand on the doorframe, feeling a mix of hurt and relief. My sun was cracking, but in those cracks, the first light of awakening was finding its way in, and I knew that if he dared to keep that light, everything would change. 3 days passed since Ethan came to see me. I didn't call or text, partly to keep my word to let him decide, and partly because I knew what was happening in his house was harsher than any storm outside. On the third morning, while I was trimming lavender on the porch, Clara's familiar silver car screeched to a stop at the gate. The door flung open, and she stepped out, not pathetic like when she came begging, but furious, almost unhinged. You ruined my family, she shouted, her voice ringing down the street. I calmly set the shears in the soil and brushed off my hands. Good morning, Clara. You're early. Don't pretend to be polite. She marched toward me, face flushed, hands shaking. This is all your fault. Since you cut the money, everything fell apart. Ethan wants a divorce, Leo's distant, and it's all because of you. I stood, facing her, my eyes steady, my voice strangely calm. Clara, I didn't ruin your family. I just cut off the money. The rest you did yourself. Her mouth fell open. For a few seconds, nothing came out. A breeze blew, sticking a few strands of messy hair to her smudged lipstick. I went on, even and clear, like explaining to a child. Families don't break because of a lack of money. They break because of a lack of respect. If you truly loved Ethan, you'd stand by him, even when he had nothing. But clearly, what you loved wasn't him. It was the life he could give. Thank you, while his mother stood behind him. Clara stepped back half a pace, eyes flashing between anger and shame. You don't get it. I just want a better life, not to scrape by like poor people. I raised an eyebrow. And who do you think I am? I hauled trash in hospital rooms, mopped bathrooms, and ate cold meals for 20 years to raise your husband. I don't think being poor is degrading. I think holding your head high while living off others is what's truly pitiful. The air thickened. Clara opened her mouth to fire back, but no words came. I looked at her, tired but not angry. You have two paths, Clara. Keep blaming others, or start living honestly. Choose. She pressed her lips together, turned, and walked off, her high heels sinking into the wet lawn, leaving muddy tracks across the stone path. The engine roared, and the car shot away, the smell of burnt rubber hanging in the morning air. I let out a long breath, not a sigh of relief, but the kind of breath from someone who knows the biggest battle has only just begun. That afternoon, I got a call from Ethan. His voice was low, tired, but steady. "Mom, I said it already. I don't want Leo growing up in a house full of fighting anymore." I stayed quiet. On the other end, I could hear him exhale, with Leo's faint crying in the background. She went crazy, Mom. Threw things, cursed me out, said I'm useless, a failed man who's run by his mother. I didn't answer back. I just packed Leo's things and left. His voice tightened. "Mom, I've wasted too many years trying to prove I'm right. Now I just want peace." I closed my eyes and gripped the receiver. "You did the right thing, Ethan." "She said she's leaving the house, Mom. She said she didn't get married to live like poor people." A sharp sadness pricked me, but I only breathed out softly. "Then let her go. Don't hold on to someone who chose to walk away when you're at your weakest." He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I'm on my way to you." I straightened up the small upstairs room that used to be Ethan's when he was little. Fresh sheets, a hint of lavender. I set a teddy bear on the bed. Leo's old toy was still here. As I was pulling the curtains, Ethan's car stopped at the gate. He got out, carrying Leo. The boy pressed his face into his father's shoulder, worn out and puffy from crying. I opened the door, and my heart squeezed when I saw those young eyes looking at me surprised and searching for a safe place. "Grandma," Leo blurted, then hurried over and hugged my legs. I bent down and held him tight. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's going to be okay." Ethan stood behind him with a small suitcase in hand. "Mom, we'll just stay a few days until I find somewhere else." I looked at him and shook my head lightly. "This is your home, Ethan. You don't need permission to come back." He lowered his head, eyes red. "It took me years to figure that out." That night, after putting Leo to bed, Ethan sat with me in the living room. The warm lamplight fell across his face, still the same boy I once knew, only now marked by the wear of adulthood. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I was blind. I let my wife insult you. I left you standing outside in the rain, and I stayed silent. I deserve to lose everything." I set my hand on his. "No, Ethan, you haven't lost everything. You still have Leo, and you still have me. What you lost today was just the illusion of a fake happiness." He nodded, eyes far away. "I thought marriage was where you find peace, but maybe sometimes it's where you learn to love yourself better." I smiled faintly. "If you understand that, then divorce isn't an ending, it's a beginning." Meanwhile, Clara, I heard she'd applied to be a server at a small diner downtown. Helen told me she showed up to apply in broken heels, empty eyes, and a shaky voice. The owner looked at her, shook his head, then nodded out of pity. A week later, when I happened to pass by, I saw her outside the place, in a black uniform, hair tied back, a tray in hand. No lipstick, no arrogance, just a woman learning how to start over. She saw me and froze, eyes widening. I didn't stop. I just gave a small nod. In that brief moment, something flickered in her gaze. Not hatred anymore, but recognition. Maybe, at last, she understood. Sometimes freedom begins with what we lose. That night, once everything settled, I carried Leo upstairs. He'd fallen asleep, his head on my shoulder, breathing steady and warm. I laid him down, pulled up the blanket, and sat a moment, looking at that small face so much like his father's when he was little. Ethan stood in the doorway, leaning on the frame, relief in his eyes. "He's sleeping well," I said. "I don't think he's slept this peacefully in months," he answered. I nodded, brushing Leo's hair. "See, peace isn't something we chase down. It comes when we dare to let go of what hurts us." Ethan was quiet, eyes wet. "Mom, I'm grateful." I smiled gently and shook my head. "Don't thank me. Live in a way that honors it. This peace isn't only for me, it's for Leo too." He bowed his head. "I promise." I switched off the light and pulled the door almost shut. Outside, the night wind moved softly through the willows, carrying a sweet hint of lavender from the porch. I sat on the sofa with a throw across my legs. For the first time in years, the house was truly quiet. No more shouting, no more tears, no more pretending. Only the steady breathing of my grandson upstairs and my heart, peaceful, warm, whole. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Peace has come back." And this time I knew it would stay. A year passed since the night Ethan and Leo moved in with me. Life for the three of us in our little Portland home was calm, simple, and full of warmth. Every morning I got up early to make breakfast for the two of them, oatmeal for Leo, black coffee for Ethan, and a cup of ginger tea for me. We ate to birdsong on the porch and pale sunlight slipping through the curtains. The house no longer echoed with fights, only with laughter and the small, everyday sounds of family. Ethan worked steadily at an engineering office downtown, no longer pressured to keep up a showy life. And Leo, my grandson, transferred to the neighborhood public school, a small, friendly place. Every afternoon I picked him up at the gate. He'd run toward me, backpack bouncing, shouting, "Grandma, today my teacher said I write the best in class." I laughed and patted his head. "Is that because you got your storytelling from me?" He nodded, beaming. One evening at dinner, Leo suddenly said in his clear little voice, "I like this house better, Grandma." "Here." No one yells. That short sentence made both Ethan and me go still. I looked at my son and saw the corner of his mouth tremble, his eyes rimmed red. I set my hand on his shoulder and said softly, "See, Ethan, kids only need peace, not a castle." He bowed his head and murmured, "I know, Mom." From that day on, I understood the most precious thing I'd kept wasn't the house, not the money, it was the peace growing in the hearts of the two men I love most. That fall, I did something I never thought I would. I started a club for older women called Grandmothers Rising. The idea came while chatting with Helen on a slow afternoon. She laughed. "Do you know your story has spread through the whole neighborhood? The ladies at church keep asking me, how did Marjorie dare to cut the money and the control like that?" I chuckled. "Dare? I just did what I should have done long ago." Helen shrugged. "Then teach others how to do it." I thought about it and she was right. So I wrote a small notice and posted it on the church board. "Have you been used or dismissed because of your age or your kindness? Come talk with me, Marjorie Bennett. We'll learn how to say enough without feeling guilty." The first meeting had only 3 people, me, Helen, and Mrs. Jensen, an 80-year-old widow whose daughter-in-law controlled her bank accounts. We sat in my living room, drank tea, told stories, and laughed until we cried. The second meeting had 7, the third, 12. Then the number kept growing until we had to borrow the church hall to fit everyone. I taught basic money management, how to read bank forms, and most importantly, how to protect themselves from family who abuse their love. One day, Mrs. Jensen squeezed my hand, tears falling. "Thank you, Marjorie. Yesterday, for the first time, I told my son no when he asked to borrow money, and you know what? I still slept like a baby." I smiled and squeezed back. "See? No isn't a cruel word. It's the first word of freedom." Grandmothers Rising became a lifeline for dozens of older women in the area. Many came just to listen, to be heard, to know they weren't alone in being used, dismissed, or told they were useless. One morning after a session, a woman named Linda came up to me, eyes wet. "Mrs. Bennett, I just want to say, your story saved me. I watched your interview on the local channel, and the next day I told my husband, I'm not signing any more loan papers." I laughed and hugged her. "Good job, Linda. Sometimes just stopping means you've already won." In December, when Portland wore a light coat of snow, I got a handwritten envelope, rare in a world of email. The slanted, careful script read, "To Mrs. Marjorie Bennett." I opened it, and my heart dipped at the first line. It was Clara. "Mrs. Marjorie, I don't know if you want to read this, but I still want to write. After leaving Ethan, I had to live the life I feared most: poor, tired, and alone. But only then did I understand how right you were. I used to look down on serving tables, yet now I'm grateful it taught me the value of sweat. I used to think self-respect was a luxury. Now I know it's the one asset no one can take. Thank you. Because of you, I learned to be independent. Clara." I finished reading and sat quietly for a long time. Outside, snow fell gently against the window, soft and pure, like forgiveness. I folded the letter and set it by the old family photo, not to cling to the past, but to remind myself, forgiveness isn't because they deserve it, it's because I deserve peace. A few months later, I was invited by the Portland Department of Social Services. They wanted me as an advisor for the Senior Dignity Program. The call came from a young manager named Allison. Her voice was eager. "We need you to share your story and help design financial workshops for seniors. Would you be willing?" I laughed. "I'm 70, Allison." She answered right away, "Which is exactly why we need you." I said yes. Not for recognition, but because if my story could help even one woman stand up, all those painful years would be worth it. My first talk was in a small community center hall. About 70 people attended, mostly silver-haired women, a few men with their wives. I wore the navy dress, the one I chose on the night everything changed. When I stepped on stage, my heart beat slow but steady. I looked out at hundreds of eyes, tired, hurt, but still bright with hope. I smiled and began, "My name is Marjorie Bennett. I'm 70, and I lost almost everything before I learned how to keep myself." The room went quiet. I told my story, no dramatics, no chest beating, just pieces of real life. The rain, the night I was turned away, the quiet hours, freezing accounts, and the moment I watched my grandson sleep safely in my arms. When I finished, I said, "Loving yourself isn't selfish. It's how you save yourself from being forgotten. When we learn to say, 'Enough,' we don't lose anyone, we simply find the person we used to be." The hall erupted in applause. Many stood, tears flowing. An elderly woman came up, hugged me tight, and whispered, "Thank you, Marjorie. I'm going home to say enough to my 50-year-old son." I smiled and hugged her back. In that moment, I knew I had truly been reborn, not through money or status, but through the courage to live honestly. That evening, when I got home, I found Leo at the table doing homework. Ethan sat beside him reading. The small room glowed warm with lamplight, the scent of ginger tea drifted everywhere. I sat down, opened my laptop, and replayed a clip from the talk. Near the end, there was a moment where I looked straight into the camera and said, "If you're listening and you feel forgotten, remember, old age isn't a period at the end of your life. It's a chapter you can write with your own hand. Don't let anyone else hold the pen." I closed the screen and smiled softly. Outside, Portland was quiet. Moonlight spilled onto the porch, glinting on the lavender I replanted last year. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and felt full of peace. At 70, I'm no longer the woman standing outside my son's door in the rain. I am Marjorie Bennett, the woman who learned to stand tall, love herself, and help others do the same. Life doesn't end with age. Sometimes it's only just beginning. It's been over a year since my life turned. Life for the three of us, me, Ethan, and Leo, is completely different now. The little house at the end of Magnolia Street where I lived alone for so many years is always full of a child's laughter. Every morning, as sunlight filters through the curtains, Leo runs barefoot into the yard, feet on the wet grass, shouting, "Grandma, I love you most in the world." That sentence melts my heart, and all the humiliation and loneliness of that rainy night suddenly feel worth it. I often watch him play and think, if I'd been weak that day, this boy might not be smiling like this now. Ethan now has a steady job at a construction firm. He's paid off his debts, lives simply, and spends more time with his son than with work or status. Every time he holds Leo, I see something in his eyes, no longer fear or shame, but deep gratitude. One evening, as we sat on the porch, he said, "Mom, I lost my wife, but I found you, and I found myself." I just smiled and said nothing. Sometimes a mother's greatest happiness isn't in apologies, it's in seeing her son finally grow up in character. One early autumn afternoon, Leo brought home a writing assignment. He waved the fresh, inky paper, excited. "Grandma, my teacher gave us, write about your hero. Guess who I chose?" I smiled, pretending to ponder. "Your dad?" "No." He shook his head, eyes bright. "My grandma." I laughed and ruffled his hair. "So what can your hero do?" He read aloud, voice clear as morning light. "My hero is my grandma. She taught me that kindness doesn't mean staying quiet." I froze. For a second, my throat tightened. Those simple, clumsy words held the meaning of my whole life. I turned away, wiped my tears, and whispered, "You did great, Leo. I'm proud of you." I didn't cry from pain, but from happiness. I once stood alone in cold rain, but in that moment, I knew the rain had washed everything clean to make room for a new spring. In the years that followed, I kept hosting small talks for older women in the neighborhood. We still called the group Grandmothers Rising. Grandmothers who stand up. No stage, no spotlights. Just a few dozen wooden chairs around a table, a pot of hot tea, and stories so real they ached. One elderly woman said, "I just told my 35-year-old daughter enough after 20 years of unconditional support." Another shared, "I got divorced last week, at 68, because I'm done hearing, 'You can't do anything anymore.'" Every meeting was a journey of release. I realized strength doesn't spread through money, it spreads through courage. When one woman dares to stand up, 10 others start to believe they can too. One winter day, while I was sorting papers, Helen brought an envelope. "For you, from California," she said. I opened it, and my heart dipped at the familiar line, "Clara." I took a deep breath and began to read. "Marjorie, for the past 2 years I've worked in a restaurant and paid my own way. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for forcing me to grow up, because otherwise I'd still be a selfish woman who only knows how to blame others. I'm getting remarried now this time, to someone who truly loves me, not my money. Wishing you peace. Clara." When I finished, I went still. A breeze at the window stirred the white curtain, carrying a faint scent of lavender through the room. I folded the letter, set it beside my late husband's photo, and smiled softly. Forgiveness isn't because they deserve it, it's because I deserve peace. I whispered as if speaking to his spirit, "Frank, that girl finally understands." Maybe every trial we endured left something good for someone else. A few months later, the local paper unexpectedly ran a story about me, titled, "A 70-year-old woman who's changing how hundreds of families treat their parents." They called me Portland's inspiration. I just smiled. I'm no hero, I'm a mother who was once left in the rain and then learned to hold an umbrella for herself. That article spread faster than I expected. Soon after, I received an invitation to join the Senior Dignity Program, a project supporting seniors who are financially abused. The program lead called and spoke with warm respect. "Mrs. Bennett, we heard your story and believe you can help many people find their own voice again." I agreed without hesitation. From someone who was hurt, I became someone who helps others find shelter in the sun. Now I understand one thing clearly: kindness is not the same as endurance. I teach Leo that every day. One afternoon, as we were walking through the park hand in hand, he asked, "Grandma, when I grow up, how do I make sure I don't treat people badly like my mom did?" Such an innocent question, yet it tightened my heart. I sat down, looked at him for a long moment, then answered softly, "Just remember that respect begins with thank you. When you're grateful to people, you'll never take them for granted." He nodded, eyes shining. I believe the seed of kindness was planted at just the right time. Life at 70 is simple and full. In the morning, I drink coffee on the porch and listen to the birds. In the afternoon, I walk with Helen and we share old stories. At night, I read letters from everywhere, women telling me my story helped them stand up, say, "enough," or simply believe they still matter. Every message is a small ray of light. A woman in Texas wrote, "Mrs. Marjorie, I stopped sending money to my son after 10 years. I think you'd be proud of me." A lady in Florida messaged, "Thank you. I divorced after 40 years of insults, and now I'm learning piano." I'm 72. I read every line and the tears fell on their own, not from sorrow but from gratitude because I didn't let that long-ago rainstorm put out my fire. I looked straight into the camera during the final taping for the Senior Dignity Project. My voice shifted gently toward the audience, as if speaking directly to you, the one watching this story. If you've stayed with me to this point, maybe you've loved someone so much you forgot yourself. But please remember, kindness shouldn't become a chain. Sometimes saying enough isn't an ending, it's the beginning of freedom. I paused, letting my breath fall in step with the listener's heartbeat. Outside the window, a light rain began, each drop tapping the wood frame like a familiar tune. I turned to the audience and smiled with all the peace I have. I'm Marjorie Bennett, 70 years old, and this is my story how one rainy night turned me from weak to free. If this story touched you, tell me where you're watching from. I truly want to know how far it's traveled. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or tap like if you believe justice sometimes begins with a heart that's hurt but unbroken. Thank you for listening to the voice of a 70-year-old mother who learned that loving herself is also a way to love her family. I looked up at the window. The rain still fell gently, but this time I didn't feel cold. I felt my heart full of light, the light of forgiveness, of freedom, and of the women rising with me all over the world. I whispered, as if to everyone who has endured yet still believes in goodness, that rainy night is over, but its legacy is hearts that are no longer afraid.